Just like Dynasty Trades in 5, we don't do intros here at Redraft in 5, but we do give you actionable information that can help you win in fantasy. We're 17 days out from the NFL season starting. We're going to go through some ADPs, and we're going to just tell you which player we prefer at ADPs that matter. All these ADPs are getting referenced from high-stakes FFPC ADPs. These are actual decisions drafters have to make. I'm kicking it to you for the first one. Christian McCaffrey's most people's RB1 overall, but RB2 and RB3 is always Bijan Robinson or Breece Hall. Where are you at on Hall versus Robinson? Pick one.
People might be surprised that these full PPR formats like FFPC, I'm actually taking Breece Hall. And the big thing is the reception floor. This guy led the league in screen passes last year with 30. That's like 2 targets a game. Aaron Rodgers, the year before last, Aaron Jones and Aaron Rodgers led the league in screen passes for running backs. The year before that, it was Aaron Jones again, right? So for me, Breece Hall, that floor of guaranteed receptions in that game, I know Breece Hall is going to be just fine. For me, there's too much uncertainty over there with Breece Hall. It's locked in.
Yeah, for me, I love Breece Hall, but I'm going to take Bijan Robinson. I'm going to butt heads with you on this one. I think that the upside scenario for Bijan Robinson this year is a Todd Gurley-like season. We saw that in this sort of Rams-like offense. Now we're going to get that with Zach Robinson. I also think that when we look at the head coach, Raheem Morris has basically told us that this is going to be the Bijan Robinson show. Both are exceptional players. And then a tiebreaker, Coop, indoor games. Second half of the year, I don't have to worry about as many weather situations. Splitting hairs, I love them both, but I'm going Bijan. Coop is going Breece Hall head-to-head. Let's take it to our next one. This is a fun one. 2 players that finished 1 and 2 in wide receiver points per game last season. They were the wide receiver 1 and the wide receiver 2 overall, and their points per game average was separated by literally 0.1 points. Both of these guys crushed. Are you on CeeDee Lamb or Tyreek Hill? This is a big decision for a lot of drafters at the 2 and the 3 spot.
Yeah, it's a big one. But for me, it's CeeDee Lamb. They've shown no indication. Obviously, they got to get the contract thing figured out. They've shown no indication that they're not going to use him the same way they used him last year. Whereas Tyreek Hill came out and basically said that he felt it was selfish for him to set that goal of 2,000 yards. He wants to be more of a team player. His goal this year is winning a playoff game. And we have to remember that Tyreek Hill is not young, man. He's like 31 years old now. He suffered the ankle injury last year. They have another elite option in Jalen Waddle. They have Jonnu Smith now. I just look at CeeDee Lamb and I'm like, if it's not CeeDee Lamb on that Cowboys offense, it's nobody. Whereas with this Dolphins one, they can spread the ball around a little more.
Yeah, and I'm with you. I'm agreeing with you on CeeDee Lamb. I've actually taken him at the 101 a little bit. You can make an argument that the Miami offense is going to score more points. And I think we might both agree on that this year, that it's a better overall offense. But you nailed it with CeeDee Lamb. I actually think Marvin Harrison Sr.'s target record is in play based on the fact that Dallas at the running back position has taken a big step back in terms of guys that are going to command touches. This is the CeeDee Lamb show. And when it comes down to it, all of the wide receiver ones, we're going to talk about a couple more of them shortly, they all have more target competition at the wide receiver spot than CeeDee Lamb does. CeeDee Lamb, it's like, if CeeDee Lamb goes down, this offense is an absolute train wreck. And I think he's going to be featured just like we saw after the bye week last year. And Coop, I think he could finish as wide receiver 1 overall for back-to-back seasons, which we haven't seen in forever.
Antonio Brown.
Antonio Brown. That's right. But we're going a little bit backwards here. And for the young listeners, we're talking about a little bit of Pittsburgh Antonio Brown, not like the Antonio Brown going crazy at the end.
Yeah, shirts on Antonio Brown.
Shirts on AB was one of the best players ever in fantasy. He was so good. Let's stay at the wide receiver spot. And this is another really fun one. Once we get past the big 3 running backs and the big 2 wide receivers, there's a cluster of 3 wide receivers that usually go. Sometimes you see one of these guys creep into like the top 3. People get unique and different. I was in an FFPC main event. Amon-Ra St. Brown went at the 101 last night. So you see some strange builds this time of year. But Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson. You have 3 exceptional players that are all young, unquestioned alphas. But Coop, which way are you going? This is 3 players to choose from.
Yeah, man. So with Jefferson, the QB situation just doesn't have me completely out at this draft spot with these guys on the board. So as incredible as he is, it's just hard to say, oh yeah, they'll just plug in another quarterback. He'll have 1,800 yards again, right? With Amon-Ra St. Brown, the floor is incredible with PPR, but I do worry about his ability to break off big plays. Also, that defense is going to get better. That run game is going to get better. I'm not even sure they need to throw as much, right? We watched Patrick Mahomes throw 50 touchdown passes one year when they went 12-4. Very next year, defense gets better. Run game gets better. They go 14-2, and he doesn't throw 50 touchdown passes. So I worry about that. With Jamar Chase, it's very exciting for me because I look at CeeDee Lamb last year, third best wide receiver season of all time in fantasy football. Number one best was Cooper Kupp. Both those seasons, those two players ran the fourth most routes from the slot. I look at this offense now. Last year, it was so obvious. Higgins on the outside on one side, Chase outside on one side, Tyler Boyd in the slot. This year, with Tyler Boyd gone and Jermaine Burton in town, and Jermaine Burton is more of an outside guy, I could see them moving Chase in, moving him around, using him more in the slot the way we see Keenan Allen, Cooper Kupp, CeeDee Lamb, Chris Godwin. Jamar Chase is here playing with Joe Burrow, could have a ceiling that's higher than what we've seen from him before. So I'm very excited about Chase.
We're agreeing once again. And again, this is another splitting hairs one. I love the Sun God, and Justin Jefferson's Justin Jefferson. But Jamar Chase, for me, is the one I'm going to lean with here. I'll also bring up the fact that we have the new running backs. I think is a little bit more of a question mark as to, are those guys going to be used like Mixon and Pirine? I love that you brought up Tyler Boyd. Yeah, it's Jermaine Burton and Yoshivas. Those are not Tyler Boyd type players. And Chase has been a guy that has really not seen much slot usage at all. So even if he's like 35% slot usage, that's a huge increase for him based on where he's been. And when Joe Burrow was healthy last year, he was actually on pace for a Tyreek / CeeDee Lamb's like 180 targets. So the volume would have been there, I think, if Burrow didn't go down, for him to maybe make that push in the second half of the year to catch those guys. We love the fact that he's young. It just seems like it's a Jamar Chase season. And I also think the AFC North is going to be a little bit more shootout friendly, with Cleveland playing faster, with Baltimore having an absolute mob, and Pittsburgh having improved quarterback play based on where they were last year. Really, really fun one. Now, right below those two, especially with some of the running back injuries and the Puka Nacua injury, we're seeing Garrett Wilson and A.J. Brown living inside of the top 10. Occasionally, one of these guys falls to 11, but we're rarely seeing these guys at the 1-2 turn anymore. They're pretty much locked in to the first round. So are you on A.J. Brown or Garrett Wilson? Garrett Wilson had everything we needed last year in terms of usage. The quality of the offense brought him down, and A.J. Brown back-to-back seasons just smashing as a wide receiver 1 in Philly.
Yeah, and that's where I'm going to go the conservative route, right? Because with A.J. Brown, since he's been traded from Tennessee to Philly, I mean, he's been the top dog. The offense is, there's been some moving parts. Obviously, Jason Kelce's out, but it's still him, Devonta Smith, Dallas Goedert. Like, those are the guys. Johnny Wilson's getting some steam, but they really haven't gone out of their way to get a third wide receiver because they don't really want to pay up for one. There's not a lot of targets there outside of those top three guys, which I love. We love the consolidation. Back-to-back 1,500 yards. What more could you ask from a first-round pick? In the very first round, I want certainty. Later on, I'll start leaning into uncertainty. So I have been taking Brown. Of course, Wilson, a great upside pick. And, he does have higher upside to some degree. But, I mean, I also wouldn't be shocked if A.J. Brown went from 1,500 yards to all of a sudden having 1,700, 1,800 this year. So I'm going AJB. What are you doing?
This one really pains me, and I think they're actually both great picks. The tier of wide receivers we talked about before, both of these guys have the ability to outscore all three of them, in my opinion. When we get with A.J. Brown, it's really hard to get away from it, though. Coop, I love the fact that you bring up that he could actually improve, because there's not enough talk about that. There's a lot of talk about Devonta Smith, a lot of talk about Saquon Barkley, and AJ's just sort of taken for granted. But AJ improved his scoring numbers from year 1 in Philly to year 2 in Philly, has a real connection with Jalen Hurts. We also think Jalen Hurts is going to be a little bit more pass happy this year. And Kellen Moore as an offensive coordinator, even with Devonta Smith being a guy that I think you can target in round 4, AJ is still a smash in round 1. I mean, I just bought my son a Garrett Wilson jersey, though. I really wanted to go Garrett Wilson. I live on Long Island.
Sold on the upside plus Sun jersey. I mean, you got to have a couple shares at that level.
I live on Long Island. That's going to be good. But shout out to everybody on Long Island. Sorry about it, but I'm going with A.J. Brown.
I think we could throw a small caveat that, like, if you're trying to win a gigantic contest, maybe you go Garrett Wilson. But my hometown league, and that's what I'm thinking about this time of year, my big buy-in, big hometown league, I just want the safest and best possible guy there. That's who I'm going with there. But Garrett Wilson, the upside is tantalizing.
Okay, so now we get to a structural question where you're getting a cluster of running backs that goes right around the 1-2 turn. A lot of times in non-tight end premium formats, you see these guys go bang, bang, 12, 13 in some order. And then once in a while, one of these guys falls into like the 204, 205, but they're all gone by that range. It's Saquon Barkley, now a Philadelphia Eagle, Jahmyr Gibbs, Detroit Lions, a little bit banged up, but it sounds like he's ready to go week 1. And Jonathan Taylor of the Colts. 3 running backs, Coop. Pick one if you had to bet on him at ADP.
If they were all healthy, I would take Gibbs. I do worry with the hamstring stuff, though, so I've kind of been pivoting away. I just love his floor in any sort of PPR, and I don't play standard. I don't know about you, so we're probably not going to reference too much standard on the show.
We're not a standard show, so shout out to the standard listeners, yeah.
Yeah, if you have standard questions, though, I'm always open to answer them. If you go to fantasyalarm.com, I rank standard. I do rank them differently than I rank other positions. But for the context of this show, just picture yourself on, a site like FFPC or something like that. And for that reason, I do skew Saquon Barkley. I mean, both these guys have mobile QBs, which is problematic, right? I don't think the tush push is going to be as effective without Jason Kelce, but it's still there. I just look at the history of Saquon Barkley and his pass catching ability, and I think they're going to scheme up a lot of those plays where they say, okay, we're going to set up a wheel route here. We're going to set up a screen pass where he's the first read. The play is designed for him, Texas routes over the middle. I don't know if they're going to really do that as much with Jonathan Taylor. That was coming out of college. That was the question, that he's a bruiser. He's going to run for like 6 yards a carry with the RP over there. I just don't see a reason why they would all of a sudden say, okay, we're going to get this guy 80 targets. And that's kind of the difference for me.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. I think I'll be a little bit more optimistic about Jahmyr Gibbs. I think that if the Lions consider themselves a Super Bowl contender, and Vegas certainly does as well, if they were worried about this injury, I think you'd see a little bit more trepidation and a little bit more caution, especially when you have David Montgomery available and a little bit more depth on the roster with like Vaki and a couple of these other guys. But it sounds like Gibbs, they want to go week 1. So I think, it's a situation where I'm going to bet on the youth. I'm going to bet on the talent. I'm going to bet on the receiving upside. Jahmyr Gibbs finished as an RB1 last year. If it all falls into place, I think Jahmyr Gibbs could challenge for running back 1 overall this year, especially if he settles in as like the number 2, contending for the number 3 target on the team, which is certainly in the realm of possibilities. With Barkley, I think they want to use him as a receiver out of the backfield, but they just have never really done it. The most targets we've seen for any running back in the Jalen Hurts era is 50. DeAndre Swift was a guy where if I told you that last year at this time, DeAndre Swift is rushing for over 1,000 yards, you would have made him like a priority target in every single league because we figured he would take a step forward in terms of receiving usage. He had a career low in targets despite being on the field a lot. So I'm going to pass on him. Jonathan Taylor, you nailed it. He's going to get vultured by Anthony Richardson a lot, and he's not going to catch passes. Even with the injury, if I have to take one in this range, I'm going Jahmyr Gibbs.
To be honest, I'm not really taking these guys, the 3 of them, very often right now until I hear that Gibbs is healthy. You're forcing me to pick one, so I did. But there might be a little arbitrage play later. We'll see how many players we get to in this segment here.
Yeah, you're right, and this is what draft. We're trying to help you out because in your drafts, these are the ADP decisions you're making, right? Not necessarily where Coop and I have these guys ranked. If you want to see Coop's rankings, Fantasy Alarm, you want to see mine, PlayerProfiler.com. This is a fun one. We've got Puka Nacua now banged up versus Drake London versus Marvin Harrison Jr. You've got to pick one, and you'll take injury into consideration. And with Puka Nacua, it's a knee, and this is a guy that missed time in college. You've also got a healthy Cooper Kupp to come into play into this consideration. London and Harrison Jr., minimal competition when it comes to the wide receiver 2, but both have tight ends that are going to be targeted in the passing game. Which one of these guys at cost are you most into right now?
Yeah, and this is where I would love if Garrett Wilson was in this group, because then I would say, okay, perfect. It's like
layup, absolute
this
layup.
Is the group of the unknown guys, right? With the upside, and I'll go there. For me, I've been finding myself going to Drake London. With Puka Nacua, I'm not just worried about the knee. I'm also worried that all last year, every team, until maybe the very end of the season, came in and said, Cooper Kupp's the guy we need to worry about. If I have a shadow corner or I'm going to shade coverage, it was towards Cooper Kupp. Now, the entire world consensus is that Puka Nacua is better than Cooper Kupp, right? I mean, at least in the fantasy world. Maybe real-life football circles, they are still not looking at it that way, but I think he's going to get tougher coverage. And we saw guys like Juju Smith-Schuster, Calvin Ridley, when the spotlight was on them instead of on Julio Jones or on Antonio Brown, all of a sudden it wasn't super easy to get open and make big plays, especially with that, that stretch on the Falcons before Ridley, his season ended. It was brutal when he was the wide receiver 1. So I do worry a little bit about that. Obviously, Marvin Harrison Jr. has massive upside. I would never argue against someone taking that, but I think that Drake London, in my opinion, he was the best wide receiver in that class on draft day. Last year, he had to get his 900 plus yards the hard way, right? Terrible quality targets. He actually led the league in contested catches. They were just chucking it up to him even when he wasn't covered. 17 contested catches. So I think this year with Kirk Cousins, if he's anywhere close to Kirk Cousins, Drake London is in for a lot of targets, a lot of quality targets, and he's going to be throwing early and often to the first read in that offense. So I'm pretty fired up about London, but can't argue if somebody says, well, Marvin Harrison Jr.'s son, super mega star that is playing with a good QB. So I'm interested. Where are you going?
So I would say that my exposure to Drake London and Harrison Jr., I have exposure to both of them. They've been guys I've really targeted in the second round in my builds. But if I had one draft, I'm going Marvin Harrison Jr. over Drake London in this range. We talked about Bijan Robinson earlier, where Marvin Harrison Jr. in Arizona, I think the offense is going to be more Harrison Jr. and Trey McBride focused than necessarily the running backs. Atlanta, with the defense that could be a little bit better this year, I think there's going to be certain games where they do lean on Bijan a lot, and also Tyler Algier, a little bit of an annoying presence. But the running backs in general, for me, we've seen rookie wide receivers finish inside of the top 5 scorers, top 6 scorers in 3 out of the last 4 seasons with Chase, Jefferson, Puka Nacua. I think Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to make it 4 out of 5. I think he's going to absolutely smash. Incredible touchdown potential. He already looks unguardable in the red zone. He's the real deal. He's going to step right into it. And Greg Dortch and Michael Wilson at wide receiver 2, it's sort of minimal wide receiver 2 competition in terms of guys that are really going to take away targets from a true alpha. London's also going to smash, though. He's a fine pick as well. I'm very worried about Puka Nacua. I'm only taking him right now when he slips a little bit more. And I've actually taken a little bit of Cooper Kupp lately, Coop. So let's keep Cooper
Kupp. The availability of London and Marvin Harrison Jr., where they go, is why I don't have a ton of Barkley and Taylor and at times Gibbs.
Yeah, no, I agree. Both of those guys are super appealing. Wide receiver clicks because of the way wide receiver kind of clears up. And you have some interesting running backs, which is a nice segue into our next question. These guys are sometimes second rounders, a lot of times third rounders. Let's call them mid-second to mid-third. This whole tier gets cleaned up. Derrick Henry, the big dog, now in Baltimore, Devon Achane, Travis Etienne, and Josh Jacobs. 4 of them